So you're trying to build a C++ project for an older version of Unreal Engine and you're running into issues because you don't have a compatible version of Visual Studio. This is the right video for you. According to the official Epic Games documentation, Visual Studio 2022 as of now is the default version for Unreal Engine 5. But for Unreal Engine 4, depending on the specific UE4 version, you'll have to use either Visual Studio 2019 all the way down to 2013. Based off this chart and the version of Unreal Engine 4 that you are working with, determine which version of Visual Studio you need to install, then go to the chapter in this video to install that specific version of Visual Studio and skip the other chapters of the video that cover the other versions. For Visual Studio 2019 and 2017, there is no longer an official Visual Studio downloads page, but there are still official Microsoft URLs for downloading the installers for VS 2019 and 2017 according to various Microsoft and Visual Studio forum posts. In this video, we are only going to run through the installation process for Visual Studio 2017 because the process for 2019 is almost exactly the same. So if we look here, we have an aka.ms link for each version of Visual Studio 2017. If you change where it says 15 to 16, then each link will be for Visual Studio 2019 instead. But I'm only interested in the free community version, so open this last aka.ms link and that should have downloaded this VS Community executable. If you open this file up, it will install the Visual Studio installer if you don't have it already, and afterwards the installer will open up with this window, giving you options to select workloads and individual components for your new Visual Studio installation. All we need to select here are the following workloads: .NET Desktop Development with C++, and Game Development with C++. Now for just Visual Studio 2017, not 2019, you also have to install this Windows 8.1 SDK component on the right side here under where it says Optional, under where it says Game Development with C++. If you don't see it here, then switch to the Individual Components tab and look up Windows 8 SDK. Select it from here and then just click Install. This will take a while, so please like and subscribe, pause the video and come back when this installation is done. Once Visual Studio has finished installing, it should have opened up automatically. If it didn't, then open it. You'll see this prompt to log into your Microsoft account. Do not click on where it says not now, maybe later, because after a certain time period, you'll have to log in anyway. If you don't have an account, then make one. Otherwise, just sign in. And then that is technically it for Visual Studio 2019. You can actually skip the rest of this chapter as well as the chapter for Visual Studio 2015 and 2013. But if you are installing Visual Studio 2017, there are still a couple of things you need to do. That includes checking a specific registry subkey that Unreal Engine and other software use to locate older versions of Visual Studio. So look up Registry Editor like I just did in the Windows search bar and open it up. To make this easier, I'm going to use the address bar up here. Get rid of whatever's already in here, copy the path of the subkey from the description of the video, paste it in here, and then press enter. Now if you don't see what I see on my screen, this registry value with the name 15.0 and data containing the path of the Visual Studio 2017 installation directory, then you have to go back to the Visual Studio installer and repair your Visual Studio installation by clicking on where it says More and then Repair. After doing a repair, you'll have to restart your computer. But if you do see this value for the registry subkey that we copied from the description of the video, you are good to go for Visual Studio 2017. For Visual Studio 2015 and 2013, there is no longer an official Visual Studio downloads page, but there are still official Microsoft links for downloading the installers for Visual Studio 2015 and 2013 according to various Microsoft and Visual Studio forum posts. In this video, we are only going to run through the installation process for Visual Studio 2015 because the process for 2013 is almost exactly the same. So if we look here, we have these two go.microsoft.com links, both for free community versions of Visual Studio. The first one is for 2015 and the second one is for 2013. Open the URL for the version that you are interested in. Note that this downloads an ISO image, also known as an offline installer, so unlike a web installer, this will take a while, so please feel free to pause the video, give the video a like, subscribe, and come back when this is done. Once the ISO file has been installed, open it up, and it should open up this File Explorer window. From here, double-click on this application called VS Community. That should open up the actual installer. Change the installation type if you're installing Visual Studio 2015 to custom, because Visual C++ is not a default feature, so you have to select that. And we don't need a couple of these default selected features such as web developer tools and phone emulators. Just real quick, this is what it looks like for Visual Studio 2013 in terms of what you can exclude from your Visual Studio installation, which is literally every option shown here. But once you're done with that, go ahead and click install. This will take some time, so feel free to pause the video and come back when this is done. After Visual Studio 2015 or 2013 has finished installing, we have to double check that the registry subkey and environment variables were updated correctly, because both the registry subkey and the environment variable are used by Unreal Engine and other software to locate these old Visual Studio installations. Starting with the registry subkey, look up Registry Editor in the Windows search bar and open that up. To make things easier, I'm going to use this address bar up here, delete whatever's in here, copy the registry subkey from the description of the video, paste it in, and press enter. For Visual Studio 2015, you should see a registry value here with the name 14.0 and data containing the path to the Visual Studio 2015 installation directory. For Visual Studio 2013, the name here would instead be 12.0, and the data would contain the path to the 2013 installation. Now to check the environment variables, look up Edit the System Environment Variables in your Windows search bar, and from here, click on where it says Environment Variables. And you should see under System Variables for Visual Studio 2015 a variable called VS140 Common Tools. For 2013, the variable would be called VS120 Common Tools. If anything that was just shown in the registry and the environment variables were missing, then you have to go back to the Visual Studio installer and repair your Visual Studio installation by clicking this repair button. Note that after you do a repair, you will have to restart your computer. But if your environment variable and registry subkey are set up correctly, then eject the ISO disk drive for Visual Studio in File Explorer by right-clicking on it, selecting eject, and you are all set for Visual Studio 2013 and can skip the rest of this chapter. For Visual Studio 2015 though, there is one last thing we need to do. If you have Visual Studio 2022 installed, you can't have the Windows SDK version 10.0.26100 installed. This is currently the newest Windows SDK version, so it is possible that if there is now a newer version of the Windows SDK, then that could also conflict with Visual Studio 2015. If this applies to you, then modify your Visual Studio installation to remove this component. It's also possible that you have the specific version of the Windows SDK installed separately from Visual Studio. To check this, go to File Explorer and in the address bar, copy and paste this path from the video description, and you'll see all the Windows SDKs on your computer. If you see a folder here prefixed by 10.0.26100 or prefixed by an even newer version, and you're having issues building an Unreal Engine C++ project in Visual Studio 2015, I would suggest renaming those folders rather than deleting them, just to be safe, to see if that fixes the compilation issues. If it does, then it's up to you on what you want to do with those folders. Before I move on, I just want to quickly show why anyone would ever use Unreal Engine 4 in 2025, especially an older version of UE4. So if you're interested, you can pause this video and read this list. This list will also be in a pinned comment below. Now let's actually make sure that everything went okay. Open up any version of Unreal Engine 4 and create a new C++ project from the editor. Template does not matter. If the project launched in the editor upon creation, then everything worked out, but in very old versions of the engine, you have to build the project manually in Visual Studio first. So go ahead and do that if needed, and then open up the project in the editor. One last thing I want to cover is in the editor, if you have multiple versions of Visual Studio installed and you want your project to automatically prefer one version over the other, go to Edit, Editor Preferences, on the left under General, source code, and click the drop down menu to the right of where it says source code editor. But that is all for this video. Now you can create new C++ projects as well as build existing C++ projects in older versions of Unreal Engine. If you found the video helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe. Follow us on our other social media pages. Join our Discord server. Support the channel like our higher tier patrons in Lucas Moskin and Morgan Heineman. And have a nice day.